as the world scrambles to roll out booster shots and in some cases kick off COVID-19 vaccination drives, Pfizer says results from clinical trials show its experimental COVID-19 pill drastically reduces severe disease by up to 90%. The tablet is yet to get full approval for use in the world. To talk more on this then, we're joined by a senior lecturer in the Division of Pharmacology at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Andy Gray. Mr. Gray, a very good evening to you. Welcome to News at Prime. So at this stage, an experimental drug, is it too soon to call it a breakthrough?
Certainly, I think it is too soon. No medicines regulatory authority in the world has yet approved use of this drug. But in addition, there are a number of challenges to its use in practice. So we need more data, we need access to the full results, but we also need to get around some of the practicalities.
And what would be unique, of course, with this pill Pfizer is saying is it could be administered to people who are COVID positive, whereas vaccines are given before you take ill. So this would be in the early stages of infection, I think, within a five-day period from when the symptoms begin to show.
Exactly, and that is one of the challenges, is that you have to start treatment very early or else it looks as if this drug doesn't have the effect that you desire. So getting an accurate diagnosis in a laboratory test early is going to be one of the challenges. The other thing is that you have to think about whether the person is pregnant or breastfeeding or likely to fall pregnant, as it can't be used in women who are of childbearing potential. And then you have to think about what other medicines they're on, because it's likely to have a lot of drug-drug interactions.
The EU drugs regulator, I was looking at copy by Reuters in the last 24 hours, has said that even though a full review has not been completed of this drug, the name is Paxlovid, by the way, if you want to look it up, people can take it. Is that a wise decision?
So they are giving advice to national medicines regulators. Remember that the EMA is a supranational regulator, and they're saying to individual countries, if you wish to make emergency use of this drug, here are some of the factors that need to be taken into account. But they are still waiting for the full set of data from the applicant.
And how quickly, Mr. Gray, do you think we could be able to get this data? Because one of the other benefits people are saying is that if this pill were to be a success, it would also help in treating people in particular who still aren't too thrilled at the idea of getting vaccinated, for example.
So it's not an alternative to vaccination, and we should not see it that way. However, if it does work as well as we think it does, we should be able to get those data within the month. The next question will be availability of this tablet. It is in fact two separate tablets that has to be given. The second component is a well-known antiretroviral that slows down the metabolism of the one that's specific to SARS-CoV-2. But in addition, in low and middle income countries, generic versions would be available, and we've then got to look at registration of those generic versions. If that does come to South Africa, it will only be available in the public sector, so we'd need to get the originator for the private sector.
And for Africa, it would be incredibly essential because with some of the vaccines, we've had issues around the transportation, the cold storage, for example. And I know, yes, you said this pill is not a replacement, a substitute for the vaccines, but it would offer another alternative, for example, in communities where getting access to vaccines in the right state is still slightly complicated.
It would, if those people were also able to get a quick diagnosis, and that's still a challenge, and then a medical prescription, having considered all the contraindications or the complications of using this particular medicine. So it's not as simple as saying this will be test and treat, just pick up a pack of pills when you feel that you are potentially infected with SARS-CoV-2.
So a far more complicated situation than it reads off paper. I'd like to get your thoughts on something else today. The CDC in the United States saying it's now advising Americans to choose other vaccines ahead of the J&J jab based on assessments done on efficacy related to the Omicron variant. It's not saying they should not take J&J. What do you make of that data and the fact that in South Africa currently we don't have any signs of what's been flagged as far as reduced efficacy and these very rare blood clots?
Absolutely. So the CDC advice is based not only on concerns around efficacy that affect all of the vaccines, but the very rare but serious side effects that can occur. How rare they are really needs to be emphasized. Perhaps 3 or 4 cases per million receiving the J&J or Janssen vaccine. I think we should also see that in the context of the availability of alternatives in the US. If you've got plenty of stock and you've got lots of ability to reach out to people with an alternative, then you can take decisions such as this. But I don't think we should translate those decisions necessarily into other parts of the world where supply is still constrained and where a single-dose vaccine still offers significant practical advantages. So I don't think we should see these vaccines in opposition to one another, but rather say to people, try to get the vaccination that you can get when you can get it.
And in South Africa's context, now that there's boosting that's going to begin from January, that would also help people who did get a J&J shot, correct?
Absolutely. And there's also new advice from WHO on what is called heterologous boosting. In other words, if you started with one vaccine, can you get a different vaccine as your second or even third dose? So those data are beginning to emerge, and it's going to be important for us to keep tabs for that evidence and make sure that our guidance matches it as quickly as possible.
So good to speak to you, Andy Gray, Senior Lecturer in the Division of Pharmacology at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Thank you very much for your time, so enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, Ted McKeely.